3 years ago, researchers found a T-Rex skull with bite marks all over its face. When they studied the size and spacing of the bite marks, they noticed another T-Rex had literally chewed on his face while he was still alive. It turns out our favorite movie monster was actually a cannibal that ate its own family members. But as scary as a face-biting T-Rex is, the prehistoric world held even stranger nightmares. Take Abyssosaurus, for example. This thing was a plesiosaur from the early Cretaceous. Most plesiosaurs cruised in warm, shallow seas, feeding on small fish or squid. But Abyssosaurus played a different game. It lived in deep ocean abyss. It was about 23 feet or 7 meters long, and about half of that was neck, which is already a creepy look. Fossils suggest it had the heaviest bones of any marine reptile ever found. Those thick bones worked like built-in weights, helping it sink and stay down in the dark. Instead of fighting to dive, it could drop with less effort. It had a short triangular skull and huge eye sockets, the kind of setup you'd expect from an animal spending its life in dim, deep water where every bit of light matters. Down there, it could cruise near the sea floor, using those massive eyes and that long neck to snap up prey like squid and crustaceans. But no matter how deep sea it became, it was still an air-breathing reptile. So its whole life ran on the same cycle: dive into the cold dark, hunt in silence, then rise back up to the light. Let's look at another dinosaur. The Ankylosaurus is a dinosaur even a T-Rex might think twice about. We know T-Rex was a hunter because it left bite marks on almost everything it lived alongside. It was not only the largest theropod ever, but also the biggest known land carnivore, period. As a result, nearly nothing it lived alongside was safe. Through the years, numerous coexisting animals, including the well-equipped Triceratops, bulky hadrosaurs, and titanic sauropods, have been found with damage believed to have come from a T-Rex. Yet Ankylosaurus is the only dinosaur that we have not found clear T-Rex bite marks on, leading to the idea that not even the T-Rex dared to attack this creature. Ankylosaurus was not tall, but it was incredibly heavy, with adults weighing between 5 and 8 tons, and it had a hardened midsection that gave it an unusual appearance. It had small and large bony shields that were fused together, completely covering their back and sides. Compared to dinosaurs of similar size, Ankylosaurus was unusually heavy because of its extremely robust body. It was constructed like a living tank, with short, broad, and compressed bones that gave it a good base for defense. This made it more resistant to crushing bites like the ones seen in T-Rex. But Ankylosaurus had another defense boost. Under the armor, it had thick collagen fibers that could help with shock absorption, force spread, and resistance to crushing bites. All in all, these fibers, coupled with its osteoderms, made Ankylosaurus one of, if not the toughest animal around in Cretaceous North America, with studies finding its armor to have been strong enough to even withstand a small gunfire. But perhaps the biggest weapon was its tail. Physics calculations show that an Ankylosaurus tail club could generate enough force to shatter the leg bone of a T-Rex. Not crack it, not bruise it, but completely shatter it into pieces. The club was essentially a bowling ball made of solid bone attached to a tail that was pure muscle. When Ankylosaurus swung that thing, it was delivering about the same impact as getting hit by a pickup truck. And scientists have evidence these clubs were actually used quite regularly. Some evidence suggests Ankylosaurus hit each other too. Their domestic disputes apparently involved trying to break each other's ribs with bone hammers. The clubs only developed when the Ankylosaurus reached sexual maturity, which tells us they were probably weapons used in mating contests. Two males would stand side by side and hit each other's sides until one of them gave up. But paleontologists have also noted that Ankylosaurus was not the most populous animal in its ecosystem. They account for only about 1% of fossil finds in the Hell Creek Formation. This scarcity suggests they may have had fewer offspring or lived solitary lives rather than in large herds. These lower population numbers likely played a role in their quicker demise during the KT extinction event. Also, their lack of speed due to their heavy weight would have left them vulnerable to the fast-moving wildfires triggered by the asteroid impact. which was ultimately one of the only forces that could have ended this tank of a dinosaur. Let's look at another dinosaur. Many people think of Triceratops as this peaceful plant eater that just wandered around, munching ferns all day. Triceratops lived in the same places and the same time as T-Rex, and the fossils show that these two did not just cross paths. Triceratops killed T-Rex, and we have the evidence. One Triceratops brow horn was found with a healed T-Rex bite mark on it, which means a T-Rex tried to bite this Triceratops' face, and the Triceratops lived through it. But more importantly, paleontologists have also found T-Rex bones with puncture-like damage that fits the size and shape you would expect from a Triceratops horn. These were 3-foot-long spears attached to a 12-ton battering ram. When a Triceratops charged something, physics was not on the target's side. And Triceratops was not only defending itself from predators. Many Triceratops skulls show injuries that look like horn-to-horn combat with other Triceratops. These were not gentle shoves. These were full-body contests where two armored heads slammed and twisted until one animal backed off or got seriously hurt. They were basically living bulldozers with attitude problems, and they used those horns for everything from territorial disputes to dating negotiations. So yeah, T-Rex might have been the apex predator, but Triceratops was a thing that made apex predators think twice before picking a fight. Calling it a peaceful plant eater is like calling a hippo friendly. Do not ever get near a hippo. It will brutally kill you. Now, let's look at a flying reptile. When paleontologists found the first Quetzalcoatlus wing bone in Texas, they probably stared at it for a while. Then they measured it, and then they measured it again, and then they probably called their therapist. This was the largest animal that ever flew, around a 36-foot wingspan, with a standing height close to a full-grown giraffe, and it lived right up until the asteroid hit. It basically spent 68 million years just casually defying physics. Now, you might be wondering how something that massive actually got off the ground. Did it run off cliffs? Did it need a runway the size of a football field? Well, it turns out Quetzalcoatlus could launch itself into the air using raw arm power. Picture this thing crouched down on all fours, wings folded back. Its quadrupedal vault and powerful forelimbs allowed it to clear the ground, after which it began flapping its wings to fly. Once it was airborne, Quetzalcoatlus didn't have to flap like crazy to stay up. It could soar for hours, riding warm air currents over the Cretaceous landscape. Here's another key thing. Quetzalcoatlus wasn't a bird at all. It was built on a completely different evolutionary blueprint. Birds are dinosaurs, but pterosaurs, like Quetzalcoatlus, were their own separate branch of flying reptiles, which meant the way they flew wasn't the same. Birds fly with feathered arms, while pterosaurs flew on a giant skin membrane that ran from their shoulder to their ankle. But here's where it gets interesting. The Quetzalcoatlus spent most of its time on the ground, walking around on its folded wings, hunting small animals, while flight was more likely used to scope out potential hunting areas. Yeah, it was a terrestrial stalker. This giraffe-like, tall flying nightmare would just walk through the plains, using its long neck to snatch up anything smaller than a person. Baby dinosaurs, lizards, mammals, basically anything that couldn't outrun a 6-foot-tall beak attached to legs. The whole skim-feeding idea got thrown out the window because the physics don't work. Dragging a massive beak through the water at flying speed would have been impossibly difficult. It's much easier to just stroll around being a flying death stork. When food ran low on one island, Quetzalcoatlus could simply lift off, cross open water, and feed on a neighboring landmass instead. Quetzalcoatlus lived in a world where being the size of a small airplane was apparently a reasonable life strategy. Then, the asteroid showed up, and suddenly, being giant wasn't such a great idea anymore. Now, we have to talk about a prehistoric dinosaur that was more terrifying in real life than in the movies, Dilophosaurus. If you learned about Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park, you might think it was a cute little villain with a frill and venom. The real Dilophosaurus had none of that. In real life, it was one of the biggest land predators in North America during the early Jurassic. Adults were estimated at around 7 meters long, roughly 23 feet, which is much larger than what was shown in Jurassic Park. It had two tall crests on its skull made from thin bone. It was once suggested they helped with thermoregulation because of their size and the hot environment Dilophosaurus lived in. Now, most scientists agree the crests were mainly for display, recognition, or mating, since they vary a lot between individuals. The bigger the crest, the clearer the message to mates or rivals that you can waste resources on something so useless. For some time, the idea of the Dilophosaurus using its crest as a battering ram against prey and competitors was also considered, sort of like how Pachycephalosaurus used its thick skull. But this idea is now widely unsupported, since Dilophosaurus's crests were extremely fragile. But Dilophosaurus still had an array of other features that helped it deal with prey and competitors, with perhaps its most important weapon being its vicious jaws. The jaw and subsequently the skull were both proportionally large for its body, sometimes accounting for 10% of its entire length. Each tooth also had serrations, sometimes with more than 70 serrations split between the front and back edges. And the real danger was not the teeth. It had another quite foolproof way of capturing prey. And no, this did not involve spitting venom to blind them, as seen in Jurassic Park. Rather, it was simply a speed demon that would run prey down. The agility of this theropod was demonstrated by its highly developed legs, lighter frame, and the presence of fleshy air sacs. These air sacs grew into its vertebrae and created unidirectional breathing, a trait seen in birds and crocodiles. This points to a high metabolism and an active, fast hunter. And Jurassic Park missed another point too. Dilophosaurus wasn't a solo hunter. We have fossils of multiple individuals found close together in the same area, which strongly suggests these animals lived and hunted in packs. A fast, agile predator is scary on its own. Now, picture it coming at you with backup.